What if I told you that your approach to AI could be the difference between leading your industry or playing catch up? If you're like most leaders I talk to, you probably know that 75% of your employees, well, they're already using AI tools, often without your knowledge or certainly your guidance. But here's what you're probably wondering. How do you transform this scattered adoption into strategic advantage that empowers every single person on your team? What if you could turn this challenge into your biggest competitive edge? Well, I've got something that just might help. Worldwide Technology has just updated its Digital Workspace Priorities for 2025 research. And while 2024 was about laying the groundwork for AI, this research shows how leading organizations are now scaling their AI strategy across their entire workforce. And today, we're diving into priority 2, how to move from proof of concept to organization-wide AI implementation that empowers every employee regardless of their role. Well, I want you to meet 2 WWT experts who will challenge your thinking about scaling AI. David Rosenblatt, Distinguished Solution Architect, will show you why treating AI like a new hire could be your key to successful implementation. And Mike Davis, Technical Solutions Architect, who brings fascinating insights about what really happens when enterprises like yours deploy AI tools like Microsoft Copilot, for one example. Welcome. I'm Rob Boyd, and this is WWT Presents Research.
WWT Presents Research.
Well, we're talking about priority 2 on this latest research report, and this is the one that speaks of AI. And so we've firmly got AI as a call out here in our digital experience endeavors, where we want DEX and customer experience and employee experience. We need those to be equalized. We've made that pitch before. We're going to make it again later. But for now, I want to talk about this idea of scaling AI, specifically as it relates to enhancing digital experience. So I tell you what, David, before we dive into kind of into AI specifically, what are the broader implications of this particular research paper? What do we need to draw from it before we get in those details?
Well, we have a tendency every year to kind of publish what we think are going to be the priorities of across employee experience and capabilities that we see affecting our customer base moving forward into 2025. That's one of the reasons why AI itself was one of the first couple of priorities that we ran across. You can't have a conversation involving end user platforms or end user technology in any kind of way without having AI show up within it. There's a lot of kind of potential as well as kind of a lot of high expectations around what AI can do for the workforce and for employees and productivity and other stuff across organizations, as well as a lot of anxiety around what AI can do for the employees particularly, right? So there's not a conversation we have when we look at the broad set of technology and capabilities, as well as what the next generation workforce might look like, that doesn't involve AI. So that's one of the key aspects that we're looking at in our priorities report for 2025.
AI, it's going to be there. Either someone's bringing it in on that fragmented approach, or you were strategically applying it to your business because that's what it's going to take to be competitive. Would you agree that we don't need to consider AI or not? It's how I do AI.
Yes, very much so. Just playing back into the employee kind of anxiety piece, right? We don't say AI right now in its current state is necessarily taking your job. It's more aligned, someone else using AI is taking your job. So the anxiety isn't just there for the employees themselves, it's also for the organization themselves. Are my competitors using AI better than I am? Are they finding some secret sauce or secret method or use case that I'm not seeing that could make a real competitive difference in the marketplace? And that's one of those key kind of drivers that has people kind of looking and really kind of prying at what AI can do, how it can be used, as well as organizations themselves having difficulty in figuring out what is practical within what's going to be the bang for the buck and everything else associated to it, and how to kind of maximize those sets of activities.
And that's probably where the strategies and the differentiation is going to come from, right? Or your job is going to be challenged as an individual by someone who is using AI to be more effective. And so it's incumbent upon us. It's the same thing for organizations, is what I hear you saying, is that organizations need to embrace this. We had already kind of been down that road in prior conversations about admitting that everybody's a tech company, no matter what field you're in. There's some degree of technology. And it feels like this is the first one that also not only proves that, but is
just more easily able to kind of stand up and say, this is going to be it's a differentiator. SASE or zero trust and some other things that still remain important for what they do. Those weren't momentous changes that necessarily affected competitiveness in a really obvious way, and I think this one does. But Mike, I want to get your reflections on this, and this may be assumptive on my part as well. It feels like it is going to be a critical year for digital workspace strategy. Do you agree? And
Absolutely.
Anything you would cite for why?
AI now, as David led to, it's embedded in every single application, productivity tool, everything that the user touches now, and it's starting to grow from there. The focus has been more on the AI companions that can help out the regular user every day. But now we're starting to see it bleed into some of the administrative tools that the admins are using in the background. They're helping them speed up troubleshooting, implementing stuff for users, deploying new technologies. It's starting to speed everything up quite a bit. And it's to the point now where it really is going to be a large part of your job to work with these AI companions to do your job better, to do your job faster. So you can focus on the things that you really want to focus on. AI is great for those, the past year that I've been playing with it anyway, it's great for those low-level tasks that are quite boring and monotonous, actually. I'd rather be off doing better things, having conversations with customers, working closer with some of my other workmates and coming up with new solutions. I can have these AI companions do all my regular paperwork, help me put together documents, help me put together reports and things like that. Yeah. So it's actually taken quite a bit of time off of my plate that I can focus on better things for our company. And then it's even getting beyond the applications, it's getting into devices. I focus on collaboration quite a bit. And all the video conferencing systems now, they have AI as part of it. The AV systems that are part of it, you've got AI that's built into the cameras now, so they can recognize when people walk into the room who that person actually is and track usage for me. So if I want to know, I'm bringing people back to work, how much of my conference system is actually being used, how much of my real estate is actually being used. Yeah. And then I can make adjustments from there so that I'm getting, the best performance for my dollar.
I feel like there's no shortage of use cases. That's really not an issue. I think every business could come up with an unmanageable list almost instantly of things that they could do. And this is one reason why I like how you frame this, Dave. As I understand, you did this. You're one of the listed authors on the paper. We'll have links into it below so everybody can, obviously it's a call to action. I want everybody to go look at the entire paper. But I'm kind of curious. You talked about treating AI like a new hire.
At the end of the day, the AI itself has to earn its wage. The use cases you've assigned it to, the task that it's trying to do, has to have enough value to the organization in order for it to really be implemented for the care and the feeding and the other things associated to it. And that kind of transition is kind of where we're seeing AI kind of exist. It's kind of moving forward where it's being your assistant or assisting you in your tasks and moving towards agency. And what we're seeing is, that kind of co-pilot assistant role, right? Where it's doing things like meeting summarization, helping with your paperwork, right? Helping with your brainstorming, everything else, which are tasks that it's very good for that are kind of ubiquitous across the workforce, to that agency mode where we've had AI doing that for a long period of time. If you look in like financials around like robotic, like underwriting and other things like that, where if there's a very rule-based process, you can assign those set of tasks and capabilities to AI. If you're going to get 100 applicants and 40% you're automatically not going to run through and 40% you automatically are, you can have AI go through that and then align your people to kind of like that 20% in the middle that doesn't follow necessarily the rules or is in that kind of blended state. That kind of activity and other stuff and being able to kind of hand that off and those sets of use cases are there. And it's the same with that we've seen even back to traditional AI things like computer vision and other things. Having AI and computer vision tell you when to turn a table over or when to send out a busboy may not be the best set of use cases unless that's an aggregate with a whole bunch of other use cases you might have around what AI is going to do. Because otherwise you just set a timer and tell a busboy to walk out every 10 minutes, right, to clear the tables. There's a better way, a better use case to do it. AI could be one of your most expensive employees that you're assigning very low level tasks to.
In earlier priorities, placing the importance of not thinking of AI as another siloed department or capability that is sitting out by itself, but it's integrated into every area. DEX, obviously, we're talking about here. The idea is it's integration. It's about supporting a function and then evaluating it based on what you anticipated that to be.
Well, and the AIs themselves can be very different too. So one of the things that we talk about very often is people kind of tiptoe into AI for a lot of organizations. It's one of those things that if you're, as an organization, you don't have some ownership of it, someone else is going to bring it in. It's the same shadow IT problem that was always there. Okay. And when you kind of look at it from a perspective, kind of using the analogy as a new hire employee again, you know, a lot of people, when they tiptoe in, they're exploring with like the Chat GPTs, the Geminis, the other kind of off the shelf, kind of publicly available AI. And that's very often akin to kind of hiring like a temp worker. They have some expertise, like whether it's in, you know, writing assistance or something else like that, but they don't really have any knowledge or understanding of your environment or any particular controls within your organization. Then you look at things more like the Microsoft Copilots and the other pieces that are more built into kind of your product set. And that's a lot more akin to a contractor, right? It's been trained somewhere else. You're hiring it for a particular expertise, you know, whether again, like, you know, the summarization, you know, helping with PowerPoints, right? You know, whatever those sets of capabilities are, and it's got some access into your information, your roles, your
more than the others
and your processes, right? Yeah, it's kind of a contractor there. Versus what we see is like some of the full-time work, which are some of those custom-built Copilot, you know, kind of AI tools, like what we've built internally with our own Adam, which is our version of WWT GPT and other stuff, which is like a, you know, full on kind of employee keys to the kingdom, multiple data sources, has business critical and relevant data that's contained within it.
But you didn't do that instantly. You guys built that up through small testing, slowly scaling it out, correct? Which is part of what we're going to get into next. Okay.
Yeah, that's a critical piece, right? Because just like a new employee, as soon as you hire them, you don't immediately give them access to everybody's payroll, right? You know, or anything else kind of associated to it. You have to understand the implications and the information that it's given. And the same thing is who you're giving access to these co-pilots and these other tools. A co-pilot or one of these assistants getting access to, you know, a copywriter in marketing gives it a kind of a controlled amount of power versus if it's a co-pilot or an AI that is enabled with the same rights or capabilities as your CFO. One has much more power to do or generate decisions and access to way more deep or critical information than the other one, right? So the impact to the businesses can be very different depending on who's leveraging these assistants and what kind of access and what kind of data they're beginning to access to.
You brought up Copilot as kind of being a mix of not heavily customized, but yet not an intern. It's more of I think you said contractor kind of a role. Mike, I'm curious, I believe you've been working with Copilot. I thought this one was interesting because Copilot is kind of maybe the first thing a lot of people are trying because it's there if it's turned on, I guess. Tell me how Copilot's working these days.
It's one of those solutions that's pretty easy for customers to turn on because almost all customers out there already have some sort of Microsoft licensing already. They're already using the productivity tools today like Word, Excel. So for those companies who, you know, are still trying to figure out their journey and where they're going to go with it, and they're looking for quick wins in the AI space, Copilot is something that's very easy for them to turn up and start using and testing out without much of a large investment in it. I mean, they're charging $30 per user per month on it. So I think most organizations, much like us, you know, we started with, I think it was about 500 licenses. It was 300 or 500 licenses that we started with, and got a good group of people who are very interested in using it so that we can start out with those power users who would take the time to play with it, learn the proper ways of it being used, and can share that knowledge with others throughout the organization. And then it grew from there. And then we're starting to see other tools come to the table now where people are starting to request those. Of course, our IT group can only take on so many tools at any given time. But like most organizations, you know, there isn't always one tool that's going to rule them all. We have many different groups within Worldwide with a lot of different focus areas. And, you know, Copilot may work for, you know, maybe the majority, but we definitely have groups within Worldwide where they need something that's a little more specific to what they actually do. So we do look at other AI tools out there, how that can benefit those specific groups, whether or not that we can implement them internally or not, and is the investment.
What's your feeling on Glean? Are we seeing more tools like that? Because we certainly see an overwhelming number of tools that'll probably go away soon built on the backs of these other LLMs.
Well, I think it kind of folds back into the use case pieces. Sitting down and looking at what are the kind of key use cases, what do we think that we're going to see value in, running through those sets of scenarios, and then kind of coming up with like a hypothesis around who we think are going to be key beneficiaries to the AI. Then running and validating against that. So looking at measuring usage, consumption, everything else that we had associated with each one of these AI tools, looking at who was engaging with it, re-interviewing, investigating what were the use cases, what were the workflows that they were engaged in, and how could we kind of iterate and produce better sets of results. That's why we've seen such high utilization across the board of people that have been granted licenses, because they were very targeted in their acquisition, right, of who was going to use it in these tools. And that kind of continued on in our investigation in Gleam and other areas, because very similarly, we were looking for what were the other data sources, what were the other pieces of information, what were the capabilities that we were looking to do, as well as Gleam kind of fit very well into our kind of internal kind of processes and stuff around no black box AI, explainability in the AI, understanding, and being able to score things around authoritative nature, right? Just because somebody wrote, collaboration 10,000 times in an email doesn't mean they're an expert on it when Mike is an expert on it, right?
Yeah.
So making sure that we're getting the right kind of authoritative content and other things associated to it, as well as extending it beyond the unstructured data into other things. Everybody lives in their ERPs and their other things, right? How easily could we engage with that set of data, as well as our structured and unstructured data that we had within the organization? And that's one of those reasons that Gleam became attractive to us.
It started out as an enterprise search tool that now has AI capabilities built into it. And, with an organization like ours, we have over 10,000 employees. We have groups all over the place. We have massive amounts of data. And a good portion of my time is spent actually looking for stuff. It could be something that somebody sent me 2 months ago. It could be, maybe looking for another group within Worldwide that might be doing a similar thing that I'm doing. And maybe I just want to look for people to share knowledge with. And with Glean, from what I've seen with it so far, its enterprise search capabilities are just unreal and top notch. And what I also like about it is on the back end, you can actually see how it's doing the ranking of the information it's providing to you. So you've got that breadcrumb trail back to the data that you can easily see. Why is it providing me this information over that information?
Which helps you self-correct, right? In terms of,
absolutely.
If I phrase this different, I need to provide this context. I need to do this to get this type of answer, which I think is an important part of the learning process as we get better at working with our AI brethren before they take over.
Yeah. Our AI overlords, right? You want to get in good with them before it gets too late. It's an omni-channel world, but we're all not built to be omni-channel. So one of the key kind of assistant kind of metrics that you see across the board of people's use cases is managing that influx of data, right? Because things are coming to us out of 1,000 different channels, from voice, video, meetings, notes, messaging, email, web pages, everything in its dog. The important thing is to get the information, regardless of the channel or the preference of either the sender or the receiver. And that's one of those critical pieces that we're seeing in these tools, is kind of allowing us to kind of unify, reintegrate, us to a simpler time when everything was managed out of your inbox. Rob, you remember that, right?
We're going to burn down the rest of this rainforest so we can provide enough power so that we can add another layer on top of our complexity. But I agree with you. I'm not making fun of it because I totally want that.
Yeah.
Okay, at the risk of being a little bit redundant, I want to call out my favorite feature of every research report, which is the steps that can be taken. In other words, how do we make this stuff actionable? The first one, think of Gen AI as an employee, but what are the key considerations for onboarding AI? What else have you maybe not told us about some simple ways to start addressing this?
I think one of the critical pieces, much like you said, it's like a new hire, right? So what's the job description that we have for AI? Like, what is it that we want it to accomplish? How do we want it to be able to help us across the board? So being able to align those use cases and figure out, aggregate those use cases that you have together and look at it. Maybe it's a couple discrete job descriptions. You may have different IIs that have different roles within the organization, right? And then start very often with kind of the basics. People want to treat AI as a new entity, but From the IT standpoint, it's a lot like onboarding any other application. And from the workflows of the line of business and other areas, it's a lot like onboarding an employee. What are the tasks that I needed to do? How do I supervise it? How do I mentor it up? What does make AI kind of interesting from that perspective is the people that are in charge of the care and feeding of it within an IT are divorced from the people that are using it, right? So the management and the other people that are seeing it are the line of business. How are you engaging with the line of business? How are you measuring AI's impact, its use, everything else associated to it? How are you measuring how well its impact on other employees that it's working with? Because just like when you hire a new employee, if the person comes in is totally disruptive to the entire workforce and kind of kills productivity across the board, AI can have that same kind of impact if it's not monitored and engaged with, and the people that are working with it don't have a level of transparency to understand, hey, you just hired Mary, or you just hired this AI. Is Mary here to take my job? Is this AI here to take my job? And the answer, and almost unequivocally across the board with most of the organizations we work with, it is no. Mary's here to help you out, right? Across the board. This AI is here to help you out. But people needed to understand what that means and how to best engage with this new employee, new job role, new AI that they're engaging with.
Step 2 is about doing a probation period, which is, again, following that same logic that you already talked about. And Mike, you went through this with Copilot, but can you reflect kind of what you learned about testing AI tools with a select group?
I'm still learning about testing AI tools.
Yeah.
It never changes. I'll look at very specific things that I'll sort of do with Copilot. Most of what I use it for is things around teams. I mean, just being able to take notes for me, in meetings has saved me a lot of time, because I used to handwrite notes and then I would digitize them later, which would take extra time to type everything up and then save them to OneNote. And now I can just focus on the conversation, let Copilot, take care of the transcripts for me. And then I've got, data that I can make searchable. I can summarize, I can pull out key points, all of that. And I can just save it all to OneNote, nice and easy. Yeah. So I don't have to take time after every single meeting to do all the post-meeting stuff, with all my notes and all, so that I could, weeks later, go back to that same spot and know where to find things. That alone, I think it was worth the cost of Copilot for me.
We are always asked, how do we measure ROI with any one of these tools? And there's certain groups like, programmers and contact center where you're like, oh, more lines of code were entered or whatever with AI kind of coding tools, or on the contact center, more calls were answered, faster points of resolution, other stuff. But then we talk about, like, for the general population, how do you measure, productivity? How do you show that the AI, and I could not agree more, meeting summarization is great. And the AI tools, if you use them, like even going back at the beginning of the year, right? A lot of those AI kind of summarization or next step actions was a lot like getting a high school intern. Even going back at the beginning of the year, I mean, any notes were better than no notes, because very often you left a meeting and there was nothing there. But they've progressed. You asked me in the summer, I would say it was like a first year college intern, and now I'll tell you it's a second year college intern, right? But again. Mike was one of those unique people that produced meeting summarizations and everything else after it. So I can't tell you how much time was saved over the fact of not getting notes at a 99% of the meetings that I attended. So if you ask me what the value was, it's almost infinite in a delta versus being, it saved Mike 20 minutes. It saved me 1 million minutes, or an infinite number of non-existent note minutes that I was never getting. Either from project managers and programs and everything else associated.
Because it was important, but the friction was still too high for you to justify the time it would take to make them usable. But it also highlights the thing that worries me about these things, which is because all of us are smart knowledge workers. We got to where we are these days doing things that require putting, thought to paper, to think through, to be clear, to communicate. And I worry that sometimes these tools make it feel like a lot of that's not needed, when in actuality, if we don't keep sharpening our own saw. So I think there's a balancing act with a lot of us personally, saying what is helpful versus what is it, is it truly taking away the stuff, like you said, Mike, but not causing me to really understand the curriculum or the material or whatever it may be, so that I can make good decisions.
Well, that's kind of a critical piece, right? Are your expectations too high for AI, where you're asking it to do higher level processes that, for lack of a better term, the new employee shouldn't be entrusted with. The level of trust, the level of possibility of hallucination, which I will say is probably not any worse right now than what a second year intern doing research for you that mis-Googled something, right, is kind of equivalent. So our reliance on it without having the right set of trust but verify kind of mindset associated to it can put you, between a rock and a hard place within your organization. And even so, like, people talk about assistance in writing and other stuff. And what I will tell you is AI will help a C and D writer be a B writer. But if you have people that are, A writers already, the impact of AI and their ability to kind of go back in, post edit and do other things is where they're going to leverage it from, right? It's not going to take the place of the higher performant tasks at this point. It's not quite capable of it yet for most knowledge workers. But
which leaders need to understand too, because I think we saw some evidence of this where people are announcing, oh, big layoffs, all probably due to AI, or because we're going to do more things more efficiently, and then kind of like return to work or something else. It's like, wait a minute, we over-rotated. These things aren't ready for that level of self-sufficiency, perhaps.
Well, that's one of the things that we've been talking about for a little bit is, the trough of disillusionment, right? Mm-hmm. Is 2025 are we going to enter the trough of disillusionment? And some people predict yes. But I think it's more along the lines of a mismatch between the expectations of AI and the use cases, as well as the permissions and the maturity of your organization with what AI can actually do. Because it's not just what are the tools individually capable of, but what are they also permitted to do, whether it's permitted in your industry, permitted within your organization, permitted everywhere else. What kind of access to data does it have? All those other things that kind of sit around AI and its level of enablement with your organization, and as well as the practicality of what the tools are capable of. Is it worth the bang for the buck with the amount of power consumption, care, feeding, regulatory things, and everything else kind of associated to it? So having to fit that balancing act is critical. And I think that you're going to see some pushback in this next year around AI. And I would say it's as much around asking AI to do the wrong things as much as it is around the capabilities of AI itself.
It's just part of our own, we're all on a different maturity curve in terms of how much we've, our advanced users like yourselves, you guys are probably pushing yourself and seeing where the edges are on a constant basis because it keeps changing. Every time I get another beta update from Apple on my phone, I'm like, is now Siri going to work better? No, still not. Still hoping that it'll do basic things like tell me how to turn something off or on, which I thought was going to be easy by now. Well, Mike, step 3, which really sounds a lot like the whole priority itself, but it's scale across the workforce. You have some experience maybe going from those power users and broadening that with what you've done so far. I didn't know if you have any insight on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way we did it in-house with WorldWide was pretty good because, again, we started with that pilot group of core users. And what we did a really good job of was sharing information. So we had team channels and chat set up where everyone was sharing their experiences with what they were doing, both the good and the bad, how it would compare to other AI tools. Yeah. And so by the time we kind of gotten through the pilot phase and they were ready to turn it up for additional groups and users, we had enough advocates to go out there and talk to our coworkers who were doing similar work to what we were doing. Hey, here's how I found the best way to use it. Here's where I found that it kind of falls flat. Here's my expectations for the next version when I'm hoping it's going to end up doing. We still have those groups and all set up where everybody's constantly updating each other. So we've got great internal conversations going on between multiple groups on how we're using all these different tools. I think that was really key to kind of establish that baseline first, so that once we open it up to the masses, we'd have greater adoption and usage of it.
We also leveraged a lot of tools from our text portfolio to kind of look at how people were actually using it. We would survey and ask, what we're using it for. And a lot of the co-pilots initially was things like meeting summarization, email summarization, drafting content, other things that we expected it to be based off both our hypotheses and our initial pilot users. But then we were actually able to see actual how many times they launched stuff, how many times they engaged, what was it being asked to do, and being able to kind of come back with quantitative kind of data sets and other things to see how it was being using even for people that did not necessarily respond or were not engaging in those traditional channels. We saw that the perception and the reality were pretty closely aligned between what we saw and what people said they were doing with it, as well as some surprise use cases that would show up every now and then that we would try to populate or propagate across other teams. Like, hey, were you guys aware X, this group in the East Coast is leveraging it this way? Will it help inside sales reps on the West Coast in a similar kind of fashion?
Well, David, let me start with you on this one, because step 4 is continuously evaluate performance. So this is where we get in that circular. How do we iterate and improve? But on this also, you mentioned some quantitative as well as qualitative type measurements in picking your starting projects, early in this as being something that is measurable. That should be one of the qualities that you're looking for as far as where do we start, eliminate things that are difficult to tell if you can't baseline them, I would guess, or you have some metrics. But you also go into this paper, you guys talked about using DIM scoring. I wonder if you could explain the digital experience, is it monitoring, and how that scoring system works and we would apply in this situation?
Yeah. So digital experience monitoring, digital employee monitoring. There's about 1,000 different ways you can break them up. But generally speaking, when we refer to it as digital experience monitoring and being able to look at how people were engaging with it, what was the quality of their sets of experiences, even stuff around, how people were engaging with the prompts and other things. And then similar to what Mike was saying, once we got some good power users and other people associated to it, kind of using those kind of methodologies and capabilities to help with prompt engineering and other things to help kind of educate people on how to engage with the tools and how to ask the right set of questions to get results that are both relevant and aligned. Also, even stuff around like when we did our AI driver's license and other things associated to, which was our program around enablement and engagement with AI that we did across our workforce and specifically our sales force. Was, how to phrase up prompts so that you don't ingrain a bias. You're not asking it to find confirmation for something that you're looking for, but you're asking an open-ended question without bias already intrinsically put into it. But, really looking at what was the impact of AI into the overarching user experience, because you're asking AI to assist the employee in this. So was it of assistance? Did they have a good interaction with it? Were they able to gain valuable insights and other things? And one of the things that we say, so there's that kind of opinionated qualitative portion of it, but the proof is often in the pudding from the perspective of how often did they go and re-engage with that same set of tools? How often are they using it? Because to us, that kind of shows a greater capability, it's the same thing as like people can tell you whatever they value at, but if you look at what they actually spent their money on, right, that kind of tells you what they really value. So in that same kind of model set is if people spent their time engaging with a tool, then they saw some value in that tool, right?
Mike, I'm going to word this to you. What's the biggest mistake that you see organizations making when it comes to scaling AI in the workplace?
Training and adoption. In fact, I think that's where a lot of folks are getting stuck right now. Going out, getting the licenses and implementing it and the security and compliance portion of it, I think a lot of enterprise customers have a pretty decent handle on. But it's the actual usage of it. I mean, you're staring at this huge blank canvas of unlimited possibilities. And a lot of organizations are trying to figure out, how do I even start?
How custom is that training for them versus general AI training? Because I dabble in all kinds of AI training on my own, but a lot of it is either way too far in a certain direction, and some of it's not near enough. It's still just doing, I can write a book. I'm like, I don't care. I don't want to write a book
within an organization, again, with all the different groups that you have and different job roles that you have, there's no one training that fits all. So a lot of it's customized to specific groups. And this is where I think I was in a prompt engineering session last week, and it resonated really well, especially with David's concept of treating AI like an employee, because that's exactly how they were framing it up. You're just not asking a series of questions. You need to have a conversation with it. You need to have dialogue with it. So you start out with certain prompts where you're telling it, this is your role, this is the target audience. This is the specific information I'm looking for, and this is the way I need it framed up. And then with those outputs, you dig in deeper. You ask additional questions. So you actually end up, having this whole conversation with this AI, assistant to just get more information and kind of gather from it what exactly that you're looking for. And they showed some excellent examples of how they started with very simple prompts and got more complex and more complex and more complex, and then showed how much time they kind of saved overall once they came up with these nice ways of laying out prompts. And then they were able to share that with others. So, these power users were able to kind of come up with these ways of prompting things. And then they would take that, to the rest of the group. So, most organizations are going to have like that 5 to 10% of power users, but then they're trying to figure out, how do I take that to the other 90% to maximize the value of the licenses that I've got? And that's where I think a lot of folks are really struggling, is on the adoption and training and getting people to know how to use it properly in the right ways and feel comfortable doing so they don't fall back on their old habits.
Are you asking it to do too much? You expect it to do everything straight out of the box, right? Or to Mike's point, have you kind of really grounded and given it kind of clear guidelines and guardrails around what you're trying to do? It's critically important to have a clear and transparent strategy, right? And a strategy that's not just communicated, to a select few, but one that's kind of more broadly understand within your organization itself. Otherwise, you're going to see a huge amount of pushback from different people not wanting to use the new tool or the new capability, not wanting to engage with the new employee because they're afraid, the AI or Mary's there to take their job. Having that clear strategy and a clear communication path to tie in to Mike's kind of description of the training and guidance and the adoption kind of consumption piece is real critical to seeing the value that you're investing in building out these AI capabilities within your organization.
I don't think it says it this way exactly in the paper, but I'm left with the impression throughout the research paper, out of all the different things you could do with AI in your business, in your enterprise, applying it to your digital employee experience and how you can use that to improve that, which is going to have knock-on effects with your customer experience and kind of something, we've been saying that for years. Do you guys agree that out of all the different things you could do, boy, this is a really good one for organizations to invest in and figure out how to strategically take advantage of?
Everybody's trying to do more with less, so I couldn't agree with more, right? So whatever you can do to be a force multiplier for your employees, reduce their friction in their daily sense of experience, will have a domino effect across the organization, as well as improve their interactions with customers and other groups. If somebody's frustrated because they can't find a piece of information while they're on the phone or they're engaging with a customer, that's very quickly going to translate to friction or frustration within the customer themselves. So all these different things of all these capabilities within AI, from just the most generic standpoint and its ability to help people, find the right piece of relevant information, find that critical piece, notice patterns, right? And the customer and the engagement and the other stuff, what comes next. It helps to give that kind of guidance, and will have a force multiplier effect, both for the employee, their experience and how they do their job internally to keep your business running, as well as how they engage with other customers, whether they're, business to business, business to consumer. It doesn't make any difference.
Mike, hey, thank you so much.
Thank you, Rob. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Absolutely. David, thank you as well.
Rob, always great to hang out with you, and always a great conversation.
Remember that question we started with about your approach to AI being the difference between leading or playing catch up? Well, you've just seen how the most successful organizations are answering that call. They're moving beyond scattered experiments to create systematic, thoughtful implementations that truly empower every employee. So what makes this research so valuable? Well, it comes from Worldwide Technology's unique position at the intersection of theory and reality. Their Advanced Technology Center, the ATC, isn't just testing ideas, it's proving what works in real-world conditions. They're combining hands-on experience from their own AI transformation with insights from global enterprise deployments to show you exactly what success can look like. Well, I've shown you how Priority 2 can transform your AI approach. Now, I encourage you to download the complete Digital Workspace Priorities for 2025 research to see how all 5 priorities work together to shape your digital workspace strategy. Well, I'm Rob Boyd. Thanks for joining us on WWT Presents Research.
This episode is brought to you by Logitech. With brands such as Logitech, Logitech G, Streamlabs, and Ultimate Ears, Logitech designs hardware and software solutions that help businesses thrive and bring people together when working, creating, gaming, and streaming.